In this video, we will be plotting the two vectors for which we created or calculated the coordinates for in the previous video. The first step to creating the chart of the vectors is to select the cells that contain the first coordinate and the second coordinates. So the first coordinate for our first vector is at the origin, 0, 0. So to highlight that cell, I just click the left mouse button, continue holding down that left mouse button, scroll to the right, and then scroll down to select the final coordinates of that vector. With those cells highlighted, and we can tell that they're highlighted by the green box around those 4 cells, we go to the Insert tab on the ribbon, and then come over to the Chart options. Now in Excel, you should always, or almost always, select an XY scatter graph, and we'll discuss why that is the case in the workshop. So the XY scatter graph options are on the bottom line here in the chart options, and if you select the drop down arrow, you'll see that there are XY scatter graphs with straight lines, which is what we require, of course, to represent a vector. So let's click on that option, and you'll see that a chart automatically appears. Now we have a problem here in that if we have a look at the cells that are selected, and you can see that by just collecting on the data series, so that those 4 cells that we've entered now make up a data series for this single vector. You can see that our data is in fact in rows, assumed to be in rows. So our x values are assumed to be at 0, 0, and our y values are given by these 2 values here, which is of course incorrect because our x values are in fact in columns. So our x coordinates are 0 and 3.75, etc., and our y coordinates are 0 and 1.368. Fortunately, it's quite easy to change this. Once you've selected on the series, you'll see that you have 2 new tabs at the top here. You have Chart Design and Format. With Chart Design selected, scroll across until you see Switch Row and Column. If you now click on Switch Row and Column, you'll see that now it is representing our vector in the way that we require. Now vectors generally are given by an arrow at the end of the vector. So we can easily achieve that by clicking on our vector, right-clicking and bringing up a context menu. And the menu that we want to use is the Format Data Series. So if we click on that, and then click on the little bucket with the paint coming out, and that's the Fill and Line option. Our line is automatically generated, but we want to make that actually a solid line and have more control over the colour of our line. We'll leave it blue for now. And if we scroll down, we can change all these options, but for now we just want to change the end arrow type. We select on the drop-down list to the right of that end arrow type label. You'll see that the option that we've got are no arrows at the end. Let's select this option to have an end arrow at the end. We can also change the size of our end arrow. Let's select the bigger option. So now if we close that dialog box, you'll see that we now have a vector represented by a straight line and an arrow at the end. So that's our first vector. But we now want to include the second vector in our chart. Now the second vector, the initial coordinates of our second vector are in fact the end coordinates of our first vector and the second lot of coordinates that we calculated previously. Now we could go through and add that, could select all those cells. So click in the first cell that holds the x coordinate of the start of our vector, hold your left mouse button down, scroll to the right and scroll down to select the 4 cells. We can copy those cells, so just Control C is a shortcut for that. Select our chart, make sure that the whole chart is selected and not the data series in this case. Then come over to the Paste option under the Home tab. Click on the drop down option and select the Paste Special. And now a dialog box will come up that enables us to put in either a new series or new points, tell Excel whether our values are in columns or rows, and it's correctly set columns in this case, and indicate whether our category X values are in the first column. We want to select it doesn't matter whether we select new points or new series, either should work in this case. So let's go ahead and select new points. And you'll see that has now added the second vector. Now we do have a problem because we use the new points option. We in fact lost our end arrow from our first vector. So let's undo that we just tried, and let's see what happens if we go to Paste Special, and this time select New Series. Again, we want our Y values in columns, and we want our X values in the first columns. We don't want to replace our existing categories. So now let's say OK, and now this time we've added another series, and our new series is got a different colour, but we haven't lost the arrow of our first vector. So we can reformat that by, again, right-clicking, bringing the context menu up, clicking on Format Data Series, selecting the bucket with the paint spilling out, select the solid line. If we want to keep the same colour as the previous vector, we select our drop-down menu and select the same blue, and then scroll down, change our end arrow type to the second option, and also change our end arrow size to the bigger arrow. And if we close that, we can now see that we have our 2 vectors plotted on our chart.